I'm Dr. Anthony Edwards, and I'm the instructor for Higher Education Politics and Policy. Today we're going to be talking about an overview of higher education law. So let's start with some components of governance. So first component here is just the organizational structure of the community college or university. Second component of governance would be its ability or the board's ability to make decisions and also just how they assign authority for making decisions to the administrators of the institution, and what are the processes for which decisions are made at that institution, and also if there's a challenge to the decision, is there a process for that? Is there an appeals process, or what ways do people have for challenging decisions that are made? All right, so let's talk a little bit about external governance, and that'd be, in a sense, governance that comes from outside the college or university. So there's public external governance and private external governance. So with public external governance, we're looking at typically government entities that are asserting some level of control. So in the states typically have legislative power over universities and community colleges to be able to legislate their behavior. And to a certain extent, there's in the community college level, there's a bit of public external governance at the local level, where there's local funding. Okay, and then there's also federal governance in the sense that while they technically education is not an expressed control within the Constitution, there is some control over funding in terms of whether it's grant research money or whether it's financial aid dollars that are going to the institution. And in the case of private external governance, you're looking at other organizations that are non-governmental, like accrediting bodies. Maybe it's an Association of American University Professors. There can be others that provide some level of governance over those institutions. And again, also on the public side, in addition to the legislatures, you also have the agencies, whether it's the U.S. Department of Education or the state boards of higher education. So you'll still have those as well. And then for those institutions that are part of systems, and they're public institutions, they would have some level of governance at the system level. For example, Texas A&M University system and the UT, University of Texas system. Some other states, like Colorado, have community college systems. All right, in terms of internal governance, those are decisions that are made within the institution, and how we separate those typically would be in public colleges and private colleges. There are certain decisions that public colleges would make because they are essentially government institutions, and then there's some decisions that private colleges would make because they are private, and maybe they have some may have a religious sense point of view in terms of how they make decisions, in terms of things they do, things they don't do, and that creates some differences in terms of policy. In terms of types of law, all right, so separate that into internal versus external. So, in a sense, there are certain rules that are made within the institution that people who work in the institution have to follow, and there are rules that are made by external groups, whether it's legislatures or the courts, that are the law that institutions have to follow. So, as we get into the meat of this course, we're going to have a section where we talk about legal issues with faculty. I think so this is just intended to give you an introduction here. Some things with faculty that you want to know with faculty, in addition to their chain of command as far as department chairs, deans, provosts, you also have what's called a faculty senate. that faculty senate meets, and they are, some cases formal, some cases more informal, but they are a separate, in a sense, line of authority to senior administration, and it's a voice for the faculty as a whole. And that brings up another concept, which is called shared governance, where faculty, if you think about the history, when we talked about this in history of higher education, uh, there is a long-standing view of the faculty as having a say in the decisions that are happening at that institution. And so the concept of shared governance means that typically it's used in the context of faculty and saying that the administration should consult faculty, listen to faculty input in making decisions. What we're seeing, just not good or bad, but just looking at trends over time, institutions are starting to limit the influence of shared governance in faculty roles in decision making, and that is just something that's more of a factor of the times. But I just want to make you aware of that. In terms of external governance, so typically what we look at are the state government and the federal government. Federal government really, their main power is spending power, in the sense that, again, they've got funds that can be used and given to higher education institutions, and in order to receive those funds, there are stipulations on those funds. So while again, technically in the U.S. Constitution, education is not an express power of the federal government, the federal government does have significant influence on higher education, particularly through, again, research dollars and contracts. So we'll get into some of the different government agencies that are involved in higher education, but big impact. Also, in terms of external governance, you got the state government, and so there you do have more regulation power. In many cases, the state constitutions do assert regulation power over colleges in that state, particularly public colleges in that state. So just want to kind of give you that as an overview. And again, my goal here is not that you're going to become, preeminent. Just, it's not that I want you to know every, be a legal scholar of everything. There's, people who go to years and years of law school. So I don't want to overwhelm you. I just want to give you an overview just so that as you all work as higher ed leaders, you kind of have a basic framework to make sure that A, you keep yourself out of trouble, and B, you know how to operate in a legal environment. So in terms of state government, so you've got from the, in a sense, the executive branch, you're going to see things like a state board of higher education, and most states are going to have that. Some states will have two, some will have one for universities and one for community colleges. Others, they have them combined. Texas, it's combined. And usually, whether there is a board or not, usually there is a commissioner of higher education in some form or another. And then you've got university systems. So sometimes, like Texas has multiple university systems. And then you've got the community college systems in some states. Texas doesn't do that, but some states like Colorado do. All right, in terms of the federal government, so you'll see the U.S. Department of Education, again, having a lot of role in terms of financial aid. Homeland Security looks at international students and monitoring them while they're in school. You have the Occupational Safety and Health Administration that regulates safety on college campuses. Department of Labor can provide things in terms of, particularly in the community college world, in terms of contracts for training. National Institutes of Health and National Science Foundation provide research dollars, as well as the Department of Defense. And Department of Health and Human Services is particularly involved with those institutions that have academic medical centers. the local government typically only involved at the community college level in terms of the community college boards, and then also just that local tax dollar revenue. In terms of private external governance, so obviously you got the accrediting bodies, you got the National Collegiate Athletic Association, and organizations like American Association of University Professors. The NCAA has become more known in the legal world right now with the name, image, and likeness issues that are coming up with that. But that has been a big, long-standing legal issue. But we'll certainly see more of that in years to come. In terms of external sources of law, again, you've got federal constitution, state constitutions. You can find federal statutes in the United States Code, state statutes in their various state codes. Texas, it's Texas Administrative Code. The administrative rules and regulations we found in the Federal Register, as well as the Code of Federal Regulations. You have state common law, which comes from court opinions. Sometimes we as states have to deal, or even the United States have to deal with foreign or international law, particularly when it comes to things like international students and distance education and things like that. Internal sources of law. Okay, you have obviously the regulations and rules of the institution, contracts. It could be internal contracts with faculty, staff, or external contracts with vendors, and then dealing with the breaches of those contracts. Again, you have issues of academic custom and usage. These are implied contracts. They're not written, but they're implied. Okay, case law. So the impact of cases, when the courts make a decision, they can set a precedent for either future cases or just for people or institutions to follow. And also these courts can determine whether the circumstances of the case are consistent with the state or federal law and whether that state or federal law is actually constitutional. Okay, so those are issues that the courts deal with. How are you going to find out about case law? So if you want to learn more, you can actually look at the National Reporter System for national case law. In the regional level, you can look at the Southwestern Reporter in this area, but each region has a reporter. The United States Supreme Court has reports. Okay, and then there's the Federal Register or Reporter, Federal Supplement, Federal Rules Decisions for Federal Regulation. Okay, so dealing with the public-private dichotomy, because there's public institutions and private institutions, and they're different. So there's typically been a view of freedom of private institutions to do what they want to do because, again, they're not government institutions. There's been a view of what we call federalism, where the states focus on the public institutions. Federal government tends to, from a court standpoint, focus on the private institutions. And because the public colleges are considered government institutions, so they are going to be subject to both the U.S. Constitution, federal regulation, as well as state regulation and the state constitution. We'll talk more about a situation or known as state action. We'll also talk about the Establishment Clause when it deals with issues of religion on college campuses. So for state action, there's basically three kind of tests for that, and that's whether the college, and we're dealing with a private institution here, whether or not they're essentially taking on a state action. And so there's one test is nexus, meaning there's essentially such a big loop of connections between a private institution and public organizations. The symbiotic relationship, where there's some mutually beneficial things going on between the public entity and the private college, and the public function. So if they're stepping in and serving a public function, there's a sense that they could be taken on or considered part of the state and are acting on behalf of the state, and then subject to certain issues that public colleges would be subject to. Courts have typically not ruled in favor of those who wanted to say that the institution was acting as a state or acting upon state action. That is starting to change a little bit, but historically it's been hard to prove. So in terms of religion, there's the Establishment Clause of the Constitution. The Congress or government shall not establish religion. Then there's the Free Exercise Clause, and that individuals should have free exercise clause. Sometimes we deal with that with public forums. There's, can someone talk about religion in a public forum? There's essentially an endorsement test to see whether or not the institution is endorsing a particular religion. This one tends to also get, you'll have on one hand situations in public institutions where people feel that the public institutions endorsing a particular religion. Then you have issues of private institutions and figuring out what can they do, what can they not do, what can they limit, maybe in terms of employees, and so these are all issues that colleges deal with. So in terms of law and policy, again, legal system, legislative bodies, court system, policy, we're dealing with typically the administration and management issues. There's a concept of academic deference and judicial deference. Okay, so deferring to the institution if it's really an institutional thing, but if it's more of a legal issue, deferring to the court system. Okay, in terms of assignments for the week, you've got the week 1 discussion, overview of higher ed policy, and then the group discussion on becoming a higher ed politics and policy expert. So really like you to get, look in the library databases or Google Scholar, find, 7 sources related to your expert area that you pick. And, you all can kind of pick an area within that topic that interests you. And you can describe that in Canvas there. So I look forward to interacting with you in Canvas. And if you like this video, please like it, subscribe.